So I want you to try and picture this. You're looking down from a satellite, right?
Okay.
Like down at the Persian Gulf. And it's the spring of 2026. But what you see, it doesn't even look like an ocean anymore.
Right.
It looks like the world's most terrifying multi-billion-dollar parking lot.
That is a great way to describe it.
Yeah, you've got over 600 of these massive cargo ships and supertankers, and they are just paralyzed, completely motionless in the water.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. And, scattered right in among them are these luxury cruise ships.
Oh, man.
Yeah, holding like 15,000 stranded vacationers who, they thought they were just going on a standard holiday.
Oh, right.
And this absolute paralysis of global trade, this whole thing is happening because a single waterway, which is just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, suddenly became the most dangerous place on Earth.
It really is a staggering visual. And I think, it encapsulates the sheer fragility of our modern global infrastructure, you know.
Yeah.
We spend decades building these incredibly complex, highly optimized supply chains. And we conveniently forget that they often rely on passing through these extremely narrow, highly vulnerable geographical choke points.
Right.
And when one of those points snaps, the entire system just goes into cardiac arrest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today, our mission in this deep dive is to understand the mechanics of that cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
We're going to explore how the closure of the Strait of Hormuz completely reshaped global power dynamics, triggered this unprecedented dual naval blockade, and basically flipped the global economy on its head.
It did. It really did.
And to do this, we're pulling from a few things. We've got a really comprehensive Wikipedia breakdown of the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis, and most crucially, a cache of freshly translated internal Iranian intelligence memos.
Which are fascinating, by the way.
Oh, totally. They detail the actual military doctrines that were at play during all this chaos.
Yeah, those translated memos give us such a rare look behind the curtain. We aren't just looking at the physical timeline of what exploded on the water, you know?
Right.
We are actually able to analyze the strategic, cold-blooded calculus that drove those events from the inside.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
But before we jump into that timeline, I do need to set some ground rules here.
Good idea.
Because we are dealing with some raw, highly charged intelligence today. This involves an active conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran.
Yeah.
So we are checking our politics at the door. This deep dive is entirely impartial. We aren't taking any sides, and we aren't endorsing any viewpoints, policies, or actions of any nation or leader we discuss.
Exactly.
Our only job today is to look at the mechanics of what happened and just impartially report on the facts and the ideas exactly as they exist in the provided original source material.
Right. We are here to analyze the machinery of the crisis, not to litigate the politics. And to understand how those 600 ships got trapped in the first place, we really have to look at the sheer scale of the trigger event, which was on February 28, 2026.
Let's set that timeline because, it escalates with blinding speed.
It really does.
So on February 28th, U.S. and Israeli forces launch Operation Epic Fury.
Right.
And this is a massive coordinated air campaign targeting Iranian military facilities, nuclear sites, and leadership compounds.
What?
And it results in the death of Iran's supreme leader.
Yeah.
The response on the ground is just instantaneous. Within mere hours of those strikes, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, they get on VHF Marine radios and broadcast this chilling, system-wide message to all commercial vessels.
Just straight to the ships.
Yeah, straight to them.
Yeah.
They basically say, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, do not attempt to pass.
And, to quantify what closed means for the planet, we have to look at the daily volume of that waterway.
Right. Give us the numbers.
Okay, so until that Tuesday, about 20 million barrels of oil flowed through that 34-kilometer wide gap every single day.
20 million.
Every single day. That is roughly 20% of the entire world's seaborne oil trade.
Wow.
And you add to that 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, or LNG. Europe, for instance, relies on that exact strait for up to 14% of its LNG imported directly from Qatar.
So it's huge.
It is. Shutting that down is the economic equivalent of turning off the main breaker switch to a massive portion of the industrialized world.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because, closing a major international waterway isn't like closing a highway.
No, not at all.
You don't just put up orange cones and detour signs.
Right.
The Iranian blockade tactics, they function like this multi-layered, highly lethal security system.
Yeah, they did.
So first you have the visible bouncers.
Yeah.
Right? Iran deployed massive swarms of speedboats, anywhere from 500 to over 1,000 of them, operating in these wolf packs, plus a fleet of attack drones in the air and on the sea.
Very visible, very intimidating.
Exactly. But then you have the invisible tripwires.
Ah, the mines.
Yeah, naval sea mines dropped right into the primary shipping lanes. And, I mean, a massive crude carrier has the turning radius of a small city.
Oh, yeah, they can't maneuver.
They absolutely cannot dodge a minefield once they are in it.
Right.
And finally, you have what I call the funhouse mirrors.
The electronic warfare component.
Yes.
This is perhaps the most terrifying layer for a ship's captain.
Exactly.
Oh.
Because this wasn't just jamming a radar screen so it goes blank. This was satellite spoofing and GNSS jamming.
Right.
They were broadcasting fake, high-powered signals that essentially overwrote the ship's GPS navigation systems.
So they're lying to the computers.
Yes. So a captain is looking at his bridge display, and the computer tells him he is safely navigating the center of the international shipping corridor. But in reality, the spoofed signal has caused the autopilot to physically drift the ship miles off course.
Right into the mines.
Directly into those invisible tripwires, yeah. The newly laid minefields. So the ship is blind, but it thinks it can see perfectly.
What's fascinating here is that this layered approach reveals a really brilliant asymmetric strategy.
How so?
Well, Iran didn't actually need to physically sink all 600 ships to close the strait.
Oh.
They only needed to fundamentally alter the financial calculus of passing through it.
Oh, right.
By early March, the global insurance industry basically did the blockading for them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We often think of ship insurance as just, covering the physical metal of the hull.
Sure, yeah.
But the critical component is protection and indemnity insurance, P&I.
Right.
P&I covers liability. So, catastrophic oil spills, crew fatalities, damage to ports.
Okay.
And without P&I, no port on Earth will legally allow a ship to dock.
Because if a supertanker crashes and spills like 1 million barrels of crude in your harbor and they don't have liability coverage,
Yep.
then your country is on the hook for the cleanup.
Precisely the fear. So in a matter of days, P&I coverage was broadly revoked for the entire region.
Just gone.
Gone. The Persian Gulf was declared an extreme high-risk zone, and war risk premiums skyrocketed from around 0.125% of a ship's hull value to between 0.2 and 0.4%.
Which means what in actual money?
For a very large crude carrier, you're looking at adding $250,000 in non-negotiable upfront cash costs for a single transit.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So economics, governed by risk algorithms, closed the waterway long before the missiles arrived.
But the missiles and explosives definitely provided the proof that the algorithms were right.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, when you look at the raw timeline of the attacks from the sources, the terror becomes very visceral. You might think, oh, if you just park your ship at the far end of the Gulf, away from the narrow 21-mile choke point, you'd be safe.
You'd think so.
But on March 4th, the oil tanker Sonangol Namibi is hit by a massive sea drone. And where is it?
Kuwait.
It's anchored off the coast of Kuwait. That is 500 miles away from the strait. Then you have the Stena Imperative, which is a U.S.-flagged tanker. It gets hit twice by projectiles right inside the port of Bahrain, killing a port worker on the dock.
In the port itself.
In the port.
Yeah.
The message was unmistakable. The entire Persian Gulf was now a free fire zone.
And once that reality set in, the crews themselves drew the line.
Right.
Maritime labor unions demanded the right of refusal for their sailors to sail into a war zone. I mean, who wants to sail into that?
Nobody.
So by March 2nd, the automatic identification system signals, those are the tracking transponders on these massive tankers. They went totally dark in the strait.
Shut off.
The screen was empty. No one was crossing.
And when 20% of the world's oil simply vanishes from the market overnight, I mean, the shockwave hits the global economy instantly.
Immediately.
The numbers from March are just staggering. Brent crude oil, which is the global benchmark, surges to $126 a barrel.
Yeah.
The sources document this as the fastest price spike during any geopolitical conflict in recent history. It outpaced the shock of the Gulf War, the invasion of Iraq, the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
It was unprecedented.
It triggered absolute panic at the International Energy Agency. It forced them to release 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves just to prevent rolling blackouts.
And in Europe, the panic was even worse.
Right, the natural gas.
Yeah, natural gas prices nearly doubled overnight. They jumped from 30 euros per megawatt hour to over 60, purely on the realization that Qatari LNG was trapped.
Wow.
But, energy is really only half the story here.
Okay, what's the other half?
There is a hidden crisis embedded in this blockade that is equally critical, and it revolves around a completely different export from the Gulf: fertilizer.
Really?
Yeah. The Persian Gulf region produces nearly half of the world's urea and 30% of its ammonia.
I had no idea it was that high.
It's massive. Up to 30% of all internationally traded agricultural fertilizers transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
Which creates a terrifying cascading effect across global supply chains.
Exactly. It connects energy directly to the food supply.
Right.
Because the disruption in LNG exports means fertilizer plants worldwide suddenly don't have the cheap natural gas required to synthesize ammonia.
So they can't make the fertilizer.
Right. Plant production halts. Fertilizer prices spike by 50% globally. And this hits right during the spring planting season in the Northern Hemisphere.
Oh, man.
So a naval blockade in the Middle East suddenly threatens the crop yields of the corn planting season in the American Midwest.
That is wild.
And because corn is the primary feedstock for livestock, that immediate shortage threatens the U.S. beef, poultry, and dairy supplies. It's just a perfect mechanism showing how interconnected global survival actually is.
Wait. I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because if 20% of the world's oil is suddenly cut off, right?
Yeah.
And global agriculture is taking this massive localized hit, shouldn't we be living in some, 1970s style global economic apocalypse?
Right.
Like, why weren't there miles-long lines at gas stations and massive immediate recessions across the Western world?
It's a very logical assumption to make, especially based on historical precedent. But the macroeconomic mechanics have changed drastically since the 1970s.
Okay, how so?
Well, the International Monetary Fund and the Dallas Federal Reserve models point to two massive buffers.
Okay.
First, modern economies are simply less oil-intensive.
Right.
In the 70s, GDP growth required firing up steel mills and automotive plants, which meant direct, heavy oil consumption. Today, our manufacturing is vastly more energy efficient.
That makes sense.
Second, and this is a really fascinating modern twist, the global economy was heavily being driven by artificial intelligence and the broader tech sector.
So tech growth is basically decoupled from the maritime oil trade.
Entirely. Think about it. Tech growth relies on building data centers.
Right.
Data centers run on grid electricity, which in the US and Europe is largely powered by domestic natural gas, renewables, and nuclear power, not seaborne heavy crude from the Middle East. So because capital continued to flow heavily into the AI sector, this digital economic engine actually offset the drag of the physical oil shock.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because of this structural shift, the IMF was still able to project a 3% global growth rate for 2026, despite the entire crisis in the Gulf. The stock market took an initial dive, but by July, it had actually rallied significantly.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
When you look at the raw revenue data of who actually profited from this chaos,
Yeah.
the irony is incredibly thick. The nations trapped inside the Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, they hemorrhaged massive amounts of revenue because they literally couldn't get their physical product onto the open ocean.
Right, they were stuck.
But the United States, the U.S. made an extra $50 billion by stepping in to fill the export gap. They were selling domestic oil and gas to desperate buyers at premium prices.
50 billion.
$50 billion. And Russia made an extra $15 billion, largely by funneling their Yamal LNG from the Arctic down into a European market that was just starved for energy. And Iran, the actual country executing the blockade. Because the massive spike in global prices offset the lower volume of their illicit sales, their overall revenue actually saw a net increase too.
It is a profound geopolitical paradox.
Yeah.
I mean, the nations imposing the sanctions and the nation being sanctioned all found macroeconomic mechanisms to profit, while the innocent bystander nations in the region bore the catastrophic brunt of the physical blockade.
But, the U.S. couldn't just sit back, count its LNG export profits and watch the global maritime system collapse from
No,
it.
the political pressure was immense.
Exactly. The political pressure to restore order and protect international shipping lanes led to a massive direct escalation.
Yeah.
So following the failure of some initial diplomatic efforts, which were called the Islamabad talks, the United States decides to take matters into its own hands on April 13th.
Right.
They don't just try to force the strait open,
Hmm.
they initiate their own naval blockade.
Yep.
U.S. President Donald Trump orders the Navy to aggressively seek and destroy Iranian mine layers.
Hmm.
He even floats the idea of officially renaming the waterway to the Strait of America, or the Strait of Trump.
I remember reading that.
And the U.S. military starts actively intercepting any ship attempting to enter or leave an Iranian port.
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at something historically unprecedented.
A double blockade.
Yes.
Hmm.
Observers dubbed it the dual blockade. You have Iran blockading the world from accessing the Persian Gulf, and simultaneously you have the United States Navy blockading Iran from accessing the world.
Right.
It's a chokehold within a chokehold, just freezing all maritime movement in both directions.
And a country's trapped in the middle are desperately trying to find a physical way out.
Yeah, what did they do?
Well, Saudi Arabia and the UAE start trying to bypass the strait entirely over land. They start pumping crude oil through the East-West pipeline to the Red Sea and the Abu Dhabi pipeline over to the Arabian Sea.
Trying to go around it.
Right. Trying to get the crude to ports like Yanbu and Fujairah, completely circumventing the Iranian speedboats.
But, you see, this workaround runs into a hard physical reality: fluid dynamics and friction.
Okay, what do you mean?
Pumping crude oil over land isn't like pumping water.
Oh.
Oil is highly viscous. It's thick,
Right.
pushing millions of gallons of thick crude across hundreds of miles of desert requires massive, specialized pumping stations. You can't just turn a dial and double the flow.
Got it.
Those alternative pipelines were immediately pushed to their maximum mechanical capacity, but their combined physical limit is only about 9 million barrels a day.
Oh.
And the global market needs the 20 million barrels a day that normally float through the strait. You simply cannot fit a 20 million barrel ocean of oil through a 9 million barrel pipeline.
Which leads directly to this bizarre shadow economy of diplomatic loopholes.
Yes.
Because the physical workarounds failed, Iran basically sets up a VIP guest list for the strait.
Right, the VIP pass.
Yeah. If you are deemed a friend of the Republic, you get a pass through the minefields.
Yeah.
So suddenly ships from China, Russia, India, and Pakistan are permitted to sail right through the blockade unharassed.
And the shipping companies adapt to this new, highly political reality in surreal ways. The concept of neutral maritime commerce just vanishes overnight.
Surreal is the perfect word for it. Because to avoid being targeted by Iranian missiles or sea drones, commercial crews resort to hacking their own transponders.
Oh yeah, this part is wild.
There's this bulk carrier called the Iron Maiden, and they literally programmed their ship's automatic tracking data, the AIS, to broadcast the words China owner to the entire world.
Wow.
Another ship broadcasted that it was Muslim-owned.
Just trying to stay safe.
Right. It is the modern digital equivalent of painting a massive flag on your roof in a war zone to beg the bombers to fly over you.
It really highlights the total functional breakdown of international maritime law.
Completely.
The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the centuries-old concept of innocent passage, all of that evaporates. Access to the global commons is reduced to broadcasting a geopolitical allegiance on a digital transponder just to appease a localized military power.
So we have a dual blockade in effect. We have massive military deployments from the U.S., the U.K., France, and India, all converging on the region, creating this huge powder keg.
Yeah.
And we have this bizarre VIP loophole system running the remnants of the global energy market.
Yeah.
How does a crisis with this many moving parts actually end?
Well, the diplomatic timeline attempts to provide an off-ramp, but it is incredibly messy.
Yeah.
So on June 17th, it looks like a genuine breakthrough is achieved. President Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian signed the Islamabad Memorandum.
Right, which was supposed to fix it.
Yeah, a framework which is supposed to de-escalate the conflict and lift both blockades. 2 days later, on June 19th, there is a U.S.-facilitated ceasefire announced between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, seemingly cooling the entire region.
But it's an absolute mirage.
Yes, it is.
Within days, the entire diplomatic framework collapses. Israel continues localized military strikes in southern Lebanon. Iran immediately seizes on this, declares the Islamabad memorandum void, and announces the strait is closed again, citing the Israeli strikes as a violation of the broader regional peace.
Yep.
And the U.S. Navy, in response, goes right back to bombing Iranian radar and missile sites on Qeshm Island.
It just spirals right back out of control.
So what does this all mean? When we look at those freshly translated internal documents from the Iranian Supreme National Security Council.
The memos.
The memos, yeah. They talk heavily about a 45-day ultimatum.
Right.
And when I first read the news coverage of this crisis, the prevailing narrative was that this 45-day period was some sort of mutual diplomatic deadline that the U.S. and Iran were negotiating towards to lift the blockades.
And that is the crucial misconception that these translated internal memos finally clear up.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The global public, the media, and even the financial markets assumed this 45-day window was a grace period for diplomacy, like a cooling off period.
Right, like they agreed to it.
Exactly. But the internal Iranian documents reveal it was nothing of the sort. It was never a mutual agreement.
Wow.
This 45-day ultimatum was a unilateral military gamble by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. It was a strategic threat, a highly calculated bluff, acting as the foundation of a brand new offensive doctrine.
So they're essentially holding a gun to the global economy, putting 45 days on a timer, and daring the United States to flinch.
Exactly.
It shifts the entire burden of escalation. If the U.S. attacks to open the strait, Iran can tell its domestic audience and its allies, well, we gave them a 45-day window to leave the region peacefully.
Right.
It wasn't a peace deal being negotiated at all. It was weaponized time.
Weaponized time. And this is precisely why this deep dive matters to anyone listening, whether you care about the nuances of naval strategy or not.
Absolutely.
I mean, why should you care about the internal memos of a foreign security council? Because this crisis proves how easily global markets, massive international supply chains, and your own personal cost of living can be held hostage.
Yep.
We are talking about everything from the price of gas to the cost of your groceries. They aren't protected by careful, resilient diplomatic treaties. They are vulnerable to high-stakes, unilateral military bluffs occurring in a corridor of water just 21 miles wide.
It's a deeply sobering thought, honestly. We've traced the journey of this crisis from those initial earth-shaking airstrikes in February through the sudden, terrifying realization of how fragile the world's energy and fertilizer supplies actually are.
Yeah.
We've explored the bizarre reality of the dual blockade, the physical limits of alternative pipelines, the VIP loopholes for Chinese ships.
Right.
And finally, that secret 45-day ultimatum that proved peace was just a tactical illusion.
This raises an important question, though, one that we need to look forward to fully grasp.
Okay.
Throughout this crisis, the world focused heavily on the immediate price of oil, the pain at the gas pump, and the surprising AI-driven resilience of the stock market.
Sure.
But what happens to global food security in 2027 and 2028?
Oh, because of the fertilizer.
Exactly. Think back to the fertilizer disruption we discussed. The millions of tons of urea and ammonia that were not synthesized or shipped out of the Gulf in the spring of 2026 means lower crop yields globally for the next several years.
Right. You can't just skip a season of fertilizer and expect normal crops.
The soil in the American Midwest doesn't care if the tech sector kept the stock market rallied.
Right.
Even if the ships in the Straits start moving freely tomorrow and the oil flows again, the true devastating cost of this blockade might not be fully felt at the gas pump today. It is going to manifest on our dinner plates 2 years from now in the form of massive food inflation and scarcity.
A delayed shockwave hitting the global food supply.
Yes.
It completely reframes the actual cost of that 21-mile traffic jam.
It really does.
We often measure crises by the immediate explosions, but the silent, rolling impact is always the most dangerous.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep questioning the headlines, look beyond the immediate panic, and remember that when you see a line of 600 parked ships on a satellite feed, the story is always much bigger and much deeper than the water they're floating on.